Hope you guys, like I said, got a good night's rest and you're ready to go this morning. Got your minds right. I know some of you probably are overwhelmed from yesterday's session trying to figure everything out. I'm going to tell you, it's going to take you a minute to figure everything out. And you might not figure everything out all at one time. I've taken I think I've done 9 subject to trainings over the years with different individuals teaching. And each one of those trainings, I probably was already still in the process and conduct of doing subject twos when I went to those trainings, because it's always about what you can learn from someone else. If you go somewhere, you might think you're the expert, but you can go somewhere and somebody else has a new or another twist on something that you hadn't thought about. And that's why I like to continually invest in education, to include educating myself to ensure that I can stay up on top of my game. When we get before we get started this morning, a couple of things I want to do. I just want to let's look at something real quick, because, and some of you may have seen this post, and I want to talk about trap for just a little bit, because sometimes I think that we get ourselves overwhelmed with thinking we have to know everything before we can execute. We get so overwhelmed with thinking that we have to actually have everything just perfect that it prevents us from getting started. And so what you want to do is you want to be, definitely you need the education, you need the knowledge, but you want to be taking massive action. Always focus on taking massive action. Guys, I'm going to tell you, I've had clients of mine that have worked with us, and I can when we do the subject to portion this afternoon. Matter of fact, the individual that did the $30,000 where the seller paid him $30,000 to buy her property. That individual didn't even know how to do a subject to when he did that transaction, and we coached him through that transaction. And he did about 4 or 5 subject to transactions before he even took the actual subject to class from me, because we were coaching and taking them by the hand. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is, sometimes, like I said, this guy was confused, but he continued to take action. And so that was one of the things that I actually admired about him. You know, if you guys know Maxwell's story, Max went out, didn't know what he was doing, but he took massive action. And look at where he's done today, and where he's at today, and what he's actually achieved in this business. Okay, so don't let the devil play with your mind and make you think that you can't do something, because most of the time it's self-imposed limitations that we have. We're trapped in our own minds, okay, in what we can't do and what we can't be. And many of us get so comfortable in that job situation. All right, like you see depicted in the illustration, you're running the rat race, exchanging hours for dollars, over and over and over, and that is just a trap. It's a lure. I'm not telling you to go in and just quit your job and tell them, you know, today's my last day. You have to plan your exit strategy. But the thing that I want to say to you is that oftentimes, guys, what happens is we get so caught up in exchanging hours for dollars, and like I said yesterday, that person that's paying you will never pay you enough to be their neighbor. I want you to remember that there's actually 2 doors in life. 2 doors in life. And that's one door marked freedom and one door marked security. That most of us are going to take that door marked security. That means that 9-to-5 job, that guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks or however you get paid. But when you choose that door, when you decide to choose that door because you're not assertive enough to believe in yourself, then you actually lost your freedom and your security, because those doors are going to close on you, and that's going to be the end of you. And you're going to find yourself in a place years from now that you never, ever imagined having yourself in. And so one of the things I want to say, guys, is one of the biggest barriers to most of us being successful is the fear of failure. And truth be told, most of you that are participating in this event are young enough to fail over and over and over again and still come out on top. Use each and every failure as a stepping stone, as a stepping block. Don't discount yourself, and have a plan. Have a plan and a focus. Know where you're going. If you hear me, if you hear me saying anything, I'm always telling people to know where you're going. Know where you're going. You saw in the video yesterday when I'm talking about a compass. A compass is totally irrelevant to you if you don't know where you're going. And so you're going to have that plan. You're going to have a vision and a focus for what you're trying to do and where you're trying to be. And you want to see that plan and that vision in high definition. You want to see yourself achieving these things and believe that you can achieve those things, and know that your plan might look like the top illustration, smooth sailing, but your reality, just like we ran into a bump this morning, everything was working, and then we ran into a bump, but we still got to keep moving forward, keep pressing toward the mark. So, like I said, your reality is going to be some bumps in the road. And you got to be willing to acknowledge that there's going to be bumps. But because you have a direction, because you have a plan, because you have a focus, you keep moving forward towards your objective. The one thing that I think limits a lot of us guys or hinders us is because oftentimes we're so busy looking at what others are doing that we can't focus on what we need to do. I had a pastor once tell me that never envy someone more than you study them. Never envy someone more than you're studying that person. Find out and look at what they're doing and how you might be able to model what they're doing to be successful. So if you're going to be studying them, if you're going to study them, you're not going to envy them, because like I said, envy will lead to jealousy. And then you won't achieve your goals. So what I want to tell you guys is you can't get so focused on those individuals that you forget what you're trying to do, and your plan may not be their plan. Okay? Your goals aren't going to be their goals. They're your individual goals. Okay? And so if you're going to model and try to achieve success, you want to make sure you take the necessary steps. And the next slide actually shows what I talk about all the time, because I think this is a big hindrance. You know, when I'm coaching individuals, one of the things I also see is that some individuals are trying to get from A to Z in 2 days. Okay, you're trying to be where I'm at in a week. No, it's not going to happen like that. You're not going to have that level of success. You might get lucky and do some good stuff, but it's a process, and you have to acknowledge that it's a process. So microwave success, guys, is not actually success. Microwave success is not success at all, because usually if you have microwave success, you don't know the steps. All right. So, and many of you have heard me say this before, when you walk into a building, you walk into a 10, 15 story building, when you walk in that lobby, there's an elevator and then there's a stairs. There's an elevator and then there's the stairs. Most of us are going to choose the stairs. Okay. Most of us are going to choose the elevator because we're going to go straight to the top. We tired. We ain't walking up no steps. Right. But if you do that in business and you decide you don't want to take the steps, then you're going to have a problem, because if you go to the top and you never took the steps, what you're going to realize is you're going to be at the top, sitting there posing, looking out your penthouse view window, thinking you've made it to the top, and you're all this in a bag of snaps. But now something happens on the first floor, or the third floor, or the fifth floor, and you're on the 20th floor. Well, you don't know what to do. You don't have a clue as to what to do. Why? Because you never took the steps. You never experienced the steps. When you take the steps, you learn the steps. When you take those steps, guys, you learn the steps, and no one can mess with you if you learn the steps, because no one can ever take anything out of your head. Once it's in there, guys, it's backed up on a hard drive, and you're going to have a level of success that's going to sustain you for the duration of however long you want to endeavor in whatever it is you're doing. So that's just my 2 cents on to tell some of you guys, make sure you stay the path. All the stuff that's going on with COVID-19 right now, people are skittish. and nervous. And yes, this is a time to be a little bit skittish and nervous. But just remember, as long as people need to have a place to stay and a roof over their head, this business that we're in is going to be a good place for you to park yourself and realize all of your financial ambitions and dreams. So, like, again, that's my 2 cents on that. Before I get started as well, I wanted to answer one question that was asked yesterday. I know someone asked about what there was a question about how do we determine the salaries, or where could you go to get the salaries for a real estate investor? And you can actually go and find those on the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and that will tell you where, what the average salaries are, as well as the salaries.com. So that's a good place to research and find out. I believe I saw something that average salary for an investor 2 to 3 years startup was about $58,000. Okay. And I thought to myself, I thought that seemed kind of high because most of us are still learning, but that's not to say that you can't achieve that. So we're going to go ahead and get started with program this morning. Again, welcome. First thing I want to do is go back a little bit and kind of have a little bit of a refresher with the trust. And as we talked about yesterday, a trust is simply just a contract agreement. All right. So you have a trust agreement and you had a deed. And we said yesterday what? We said that with that deed, what actually gets recorded? Do we record the trust agreement? And everybody out there should be responding, no. The only thing that actually gets recorded is the deed and the certificate of trust. We talked about the players to the trust. You had to appoint a trustee who was someone that you actually trusted. And then you would remain as the beneficiary, or have a company or whatever be your beneficiary. All right. We used a director in the formation of trust. It was optional for us to be able to use the director, and we used the director if we had maybe a minor child or someone that may be handicapped or impaired to the level that their mind wasn't reasoning enough to be able to manage the asset on their own. So you could appoint a trust director in those cases. We said that real estate was the only asset to a trust. And just so I want to reiterate, that's the only asset. Real estate meaning raw land, single family houses, apartment complex, warehouse, shopping centers, and so on. Remember, we said that one property per trust. One property per trust. All right. We said that if we were communicating with someone in regards to setting this up, we're not trying to set up our trust for asset protection purposes. We're doing it for estate planning purposes. All right. So we're doing it for estate planning purposes, because one of the things that we're trying to achieve with our trust, of course, is anonymity. And then also we want to be able to avoid probate if possible, because we have a properly set up entity by virtue of that trust. We said also that if we were actually managing property through our trust, we wanted to protect our interest in that by verbalizing that we are the manager. We want to defer to being the manager and not the owner of the property. Okay. We want to deflect, because like I told you guys yesterday, it's easier for you to fend off a tenant that wants to challenge you if you're the manager, because you can deflect and say, hey, I'm just working for the man. All right. And I have to pay these people. Okay, I mean, this is how I get paid. All right. And if you don't pay, I don't care if you don't pay rent ever. But if you don't pay rent, they're going to fire me. So you need to get a rent check coming in. All right. Remember that we also said that a trust, once a property goes into trust, and I'll demonstrate that again. We said that once you took your property and you deeded it over to your trust, okay, we converted what? We converted real property into, what do we call it? Should be saying personal property. We converted real property into personal property. And once we have converted to personal property, we have a number of different avenues and techniques that we can use with that personal property, because we said that we can actually sell, assign, or transfer our interest in that trust quietly to another individual without anybody knowing on public record. Okay, so the other tip that I gave you on yesterday is that if at all possible, you want to take title to your property in the trust from the outset. All right, so rather than putting your name on public record, you're going to take title to the property in trust at the outset, immediately upon your purchase. Okay. Remember, I said yesterday, you want to try to minimize your footprint on public record, because if you're actually closing on deals where you're actually taking title, every time you take title and a deed is transferred to your company or your name, then you're going to create a footprint that will be there until Jesus comes. Everybody will know that you own 123 Main Street for now and evermore. And so again, what happens when you do that is that because you've created this large footprint on public record, if something ever happens and someone does an asset search on you, they're going to see that you're buying properties and selling properties over and over and over. This ABC Properties is constantly, having transactions, sales transactions, or real estate transactions. So they must have some money. And that's one of the purposes is, guys, we don't want people to know what we're doing. I'm going to encourage you guys as in regards to the land trust to actually start by filling out the trust documentation and trying to place your own personal property into trust. For those of you that are homeowners, put your personal property in the trust. Okay, that's a good start, because that's going to give you the experience to be able to go and start getting the confidence to do trust in other venues when you're out doing your deals. All right. Remember that the trust is a flow-through entity. Everything that's in the trust flows through to the beneficiaries. There is no requirement for an employee identification number or a tax ID number for your trust. If you got an attorney or someone that's telling you we need a trust ID, then again, you're working with the wrong individual. You got to move on. Okay. It's a flow-through entity, flows through to the beneficiary. All right. We also said that because the trust is there is no requirement at the state level to register your trust. So your trust does not have to be registered in a state, which means that saves you on filing fees if you were thinking that you had to actually do state filings to create other LLCs in other states that you work in. So if you have your property in a trust, you don't have to worry about that. All right. So those were some of the things I wanted to go back and just highlight about the trust. Want to say as well, want to talk about this flow chart one more time. So you guys know you have the flow chart in your book.